She wore a ring just like mine, stood in my venue, smiled, and invited me as a guest to my own wedding. I'm 30-year-old Lauren Hale, the creative director of a prominent advertising firm. When Nathan Cross proposed, I thought my life was complete. I finally had something that was all mine, after years of competing with my younger sister, Brooke. Then came that unimaginable family meal, during which my sister and dad plotted to steal the date and location of my wedding. "You can cry later," murmured Brooke with a chilly gaze. "I own this day." The terrible reality about Nathan that will alter everything was unknown to them all. Please take a moment to subscribe if you have ever experienced family members betraying your confidence. I promise you that what transpired next will cause you to doubt all aspects of familial loyalty. Living with Brooke as a child was like being in a never-ending competition that I never entered. I always tried to be the encouraging big sister, even though I was 2 years older than her. However, our parents fostered an atmosphere in which Brooke's demands consistently seemed to take precedence over mine. Brooke had lavish celebrations for her mediocre results, whereas I received kind recognition for my academic accomplishments. They loved her more openly and with greater fervor, not because they didn't love me. I had established a life apart from their covert favoritism by the time I was an adult. I devoted myself fully to my studies and profession, ultimately securing my ideal position as a creative director at Chicago's Pinnacle Advertising. My identity was shaped by my employment, my chosen family, my coworkers. I was very good at telling stories that people could relate to, but I was unaware of how broken up my own family's story was. In New York, during the National Advertising Conference, I got to know Nathan Cross. Following my talk on emotional storytelling and digital marketing, he came up to me. He was tall, had piercing blue eyes, and exuded confidence. He handed me his business card and remarked, "Your grasp of human connection is remarkable. I would be delighted to talk about a possible partnership." Nathan was not like any other man I had ever dated. He radiated brilliance and drive as the CEO of a financial consulting firm. We realized that we had similar interests in kayaking, obscure foreign films, and architectural photography during our first date, which lasted from coffee to dinner. We were inseparable in a matter of weeks. I was drawn in by Nathan's ferocity. When we were together, he gave me his whole attention, which made me feel like I was being seen for the first time in my life. He would tuck my hair behind my ear and say, "Lauren, you're extraordinary." The majority of people are unaware of what is in front of them. I discovered after 6 months of dating Nathan that I still understood remarkably little about his past. With practiced skill, he sidestepped personal questions by shifting the topic or providing evasive answers. He said, without going into detail, that he no longer kept in touch with his family when I inquired about them. He didn't post much on social media, and the majority of his friends were business associates that I hardly ever saw again. When I asked him about the mystery, he replied, "Discretion is necessary for my work. I've provided advice to well-known clients who respect their privacy." Given his line of work, it made sense, and his hesitation to divulge only served to make the details he did divulge appear more exclusive and unique. My mother gave me her full and instant support when I presented Nathan to my parents and Brooke around Thanksgiving. "Lauren, he's really accomplished," she exclaimed, "and handsome too," as Nathan enchanted them with tales of his commercial triumphs. I cringed as Brooke asked me scathing questions about his money and lifestyle while watching him with undisguised interest. After the fact, Nathan said, "Your sister seems very curious about my finances," in a lighthearted but reserved manner. Sighing, I said, "That's just Brooke. She has always prioritized status." On a weekend getaway to Lake Michigan, 8 months into our relationship, Nathan proposed. With a professional photographer he had hired to capture the moment, the sunset proposal on a private beach was reminiscent of a romantic film. The ring looked beautiful. With each motion of my hand, a 3-carat emerald-cut diamond glinted in the sunshine. He put it on my finger and remarked, "I never thought I'd meet someone who understands me like you do. Lauren, you are my future." My mother wasn't the first to offer congratulations when I contacted them to share the news. Whether Brooke had heard yet was the question. Mom remarked, "She's been really depressed lately because of her relationship issues with Jason. Perhaps wait to share on social media until I can speak with her directly. You are aware of her sensitivity." I was too joyful to let this well-known pattern to influence me. After learning that the Lakeside Gardens had a cancellation for June 15th of the following year, Nathan and I started organizing our wedding right away and managed to reserve the space. It was ideal, a sophisticated glass building with a view of the river and early summer blossoming gardens. I told Nathan it's meant to be. The day after we got engaged, that date became available. As the wedding preparations went on, I observed Nathan become more agitated whenever my relatives were around. During our monthly dinners with my parents, he would constantly check his phone and twice manufactured excuses to depart early. Nathan declined without giving a reason when I proposed that James, his business colleague, be a groomsman. All he replied was, "There are some complicated dynamics there. Let's focus on ourselves today." Looking back, I should have questioned these warning signs. However, my growing wedding book, color swatches, and the constant need to control my mother's attempts to include Brooke in every choice diverted my attention. "Your sister ought to assist in selecting the bridesmaid's attire, right?" Mom recommended. "Her sense of style is excellent." I informed her that Brooke wasn't even a bridesmaid. "I've asked my coworkers and college roommates." I reluctantly invited Brooke to join the bridal party after she spent a week texting me about how alienated she felt as a result of that revelation. Nathan watched these exchanges with a shrewd expression that I didn't completely comprehend at the time. After a particularly annoying call with my mother, he said, "Your family has interesting patterns. They appear committed to making Brooke the focal point of your life's events." I acknowledged, "It's always been this way. I believe that they used me as a practice for their real daughter at times." Nathan kissed the top of my head and drew me into his arms. He said, "Then they're idiots who don't see the treasure they have." But I do. As family tensions increased and wedding preparations persisted, those words became my compass. I was unaware at the time that Nathan had his own plans, plans that would eventually reveal aspects of myself and my family that none of us were ready to confront. Subtle changes in dynamics started to show up 6 months before to our wedding date, like tiny fractures in beautiful porcelain. They were so little at first that I questioned my own senses. However, they gradually grew into indisputable cracks. Brooke, who had previously exhibited little enthusiasm for my happiness, began calling me virtually every day to discuss wedding details, which was an unprecedented degree of attention. Her inquiries started to focus on the event's vendors, expenses, and above all, Nathan's monetary contributions. "So, he's taking full responsibility for the band and bar." On one call, she inquired, "That has to be $20,000. He must be having great success with his business." "We're both contributing," I said, finding her intense attention to the money unsettling. "Why the sudden interest?" With a feeling of lightness, she said, "Just happy for my big sister." Performative. "Could you please email your Pinterest board to me once more? I'd want to see all of your suggestions." A week after our talk, Brooke called me sobbing to tell me that she and her 3-year boyfriend Jason were splitting up. The timing was especially challenging for her because they had been talking about marriage themselves. She wailed over the phone, "I just feel so alone now. Everyone is progressing except for me." I invited her to stay at my flat for the weekend out of compassion rather than reason. Using movies, takeout, and light chat, Nathan and I attempted to lift her spirits. Brooke, meanwhile, appeared strangely calm, almost strategic, instead of moping over her grief. She probed Nathan in depth about his experiences and business endeavors. Nathan responded with ease, but he arched an eyebrow after Brooke had gone to bed. He observed, "Your sister seems very interested in my work. She seems to be conducting an interview." At our parents' anniversary dinner, 3 weeks after her allegedly disastrous breakup, Brooke introduced a new lover. Patterson Adrian. He was polished, articulate, too well-spoken. He had a strangely specialized understanding of financial methods that uncannily matched Nathan's own experience. However, it didn't end there. His pastimes, overseas films and architectural photography. Nathan and I had connected on our first dates because of the same interests. How did the two of you meet? I asked, attempting to seem informal as I noticed Nathan's stance tensing up next to me. Downtown at a coffee shop, Brooke remarked, easily putting her hand on Adrian's arm. The connection was made immediately. You know, sometimes you just know. Adrian directed the conversation toward Nathan during the meal, asking him pointed questions concerning speculative market tendencies and opaque banking laws. Although Nathan responded politely, I could sense he was becoming more circumspect. Brooke's next shocking revelation was that they were already discussing moving in together. With a gasp, my mother clasped her hands in joy. "This is fantastic," she smiled, her voice more thrilled than ever at my engagement. "When you know, you know." I saw Brooke and my dad gathered together on the porch later that evening. Each time Nathan or I walked up to them, their voices fell to whispers. The laughter subsided. The grins became more strained. My mother hastily changed the topic and waved it off when I inquired what they were secretly talking about. She explained we were just reminiscing. However, she avoided looking into my eyes. "I'm just catching up, my love. How are things going with the wedding plans?" On the phone, my mother inquired, "You know, when it comes to these major occasions, flexibility is crucial. Change is sometimes necessary for the good of all." I thought the remark was strange, but I wrote it off as my mother's typical hazy wisdom. But Nathan was uncharacteristically silent on the way home. At last, he remarked, "Your sister's new boyfriend seems to know a lot about my industry. Has she disclosed the length of time they have known one another?" His phone buzzed before I could answer. He scowled as he looked at the screen. He murmured, "Sorry, work emergency," and paused to type a long response. Another red flag, one that at the time I failed to correctly interpret. Brooke insisted on accompanying me to my meeting with the florist the following week. She arrived with a polished idea portfolio that curiously mirrored my own well-chosen pieces. She controlled the discourse by offering substitutes for my selections and frequently stating phrases like, "We were thinking," as if this wedding were ours together. She accidentally spilled her latte on my wedding planner notebook during a coffee break, destroying months' worth of notes, mood boards, and fabric swatches. Her excuses were too polite, too prepared. The offer then arrived. "Liv, let me assist you with some of the planning, simply to relieve some of your stress." Brooke was in my apartment when I arrived home early from work later that week. She said she was only bringing me a wedding magazine that she thought I would like. That evening, as I was turning through it, I saw a number of pages with post-its on them. The markers were not arbitrary. Rather, they emphasized precise duplicates of my wedding concept, including the same blush and ivory color palette, an A-line dress silhouette, and even cake designs with cascading peonies, which matched the one I had saved from my initial tasting. There were scrawled comments in the margins, contacts with vendors, cost projection, computation. It didn't seem like respect. It had the feel of appropriation. I called my best friend Jessica, upset. I said incredulously, "I believe Brooke is replicating my entire wedding plan. She seems to be drawing up a blueprint for every option I've selected." Jessica gently reminded me, "You know how she's always been with your stuff. Do you recall the time she attended her own prom, wearing your prom dress, after you've explicitly purchased certain ones?" I let out a sigh as I recalled, "Or when, immediately following your acceptance, she applied to your ideal college." This appears to be traditional Brooke, merely on a larger scale. However, because she has only been dating Adrian for a few weeks, why would she replicate a wedding? It doesn't make sense. Jessica paused, "Unless she's preparing something more urgent." Silence fell. Then she said, "Liv, keep an eye on your back. This place doesn't feel right. Nathan appeared unusually agitated when he returned home from a business dinner 2 days later. He scratched the back of his neck and untied his tie. "Are you all right?" I inquired. "Yes," he answered hastily. "Just stress from work." However, he shifted the topic when I asked for more information. Something frigid, like the air before a storm, suddenly settled in my chest. I heard whispered whispers coming from the restroom when I woke up that night. Nathan was speaking on the phone. "It's not time yet," he whispered to me. "I know what I'm doing, I assure you." He said it was an international client, someone calling from a different time zone, when I questioned him about it later. He gave a logical explanation. However, the doubt had already been sown and was beginning to spread. My fiancé and my sister were both behaving oddly. Additionally, I sensed an unseen thread connecting their actions in ways I didn't yet comprehend, even if I couldn't exactly put my finger on it. My mother texted me on Tuesday morning, "Tonight's family emergency meal. 7 p.m. everyone has to go." No justification, no specific. It was simply one of those imposing summonses to which I had become used throughout my life. "Do you think we should bring anything?" I responded to the text, thinking anything from a financial catastrophe to a health issue. "Only you." And in a cryptic response, "Open minds." Distracted at work, I looped through possibilities all day long, anxiousness buzzing like static in the back of my head. Nathan hardly responded when I informed him about it. It was almost as though he had anticipated this. He gave my hand a comforting squeeze and stated, "No matter what, we'll deal with it together." However, the expression in his eyes did not correspond with the pressure in his grip. When we got to my parents' house, Brooke's car was already parked in the driveway, next to an unknown luxury sedan that I thought belonged to Adrian. Tension permeated the air inside, but there was also a sense of eagerness underlying it. My mother busied herself preparing canapés, which were meticulously planned and meticulously managed, as if she were trying too hard to appear impromptu. My father poured drinks without looking at me. We engaged in stilted small chat for 20 minutes before I eventually said, "What's the emergency?" My father looked at my mother and cleared his throat. "Lauren, we must talk about something crucial. Something that impacts every member of the family. Are you ill? Is there a sick person?" I felt panic rise in my throat. My mother interrupted abruptly. "No, nothing like that. It has to do with money and timing." The announcement that came next was well planned. I could tell it had been practiced before we arrived. My father clarified that they were unable to make the initial pledged contribution to my wedding because of unforeseen issues with their investments. With a tone of remorse mixed with phony hope, my mother continued, "We still want to help. Just not how we had hoped." Before I could comprehend it, Brooke grabbed for Adrian's hand, her face beaming with what appeared to be triumph, thinly veiled as joy. She raised her hand to reveal a diamond ring that suspiciously resembled mine and declared, "Adrian and I are engaged." It was incredibly romantic and unexpected. After dating for 3 weeks, I couldn't contain my disbelief when I spoke. "You know, when it's right," Adrian said coolly, putting his arm around Brooke's waist. "We'd rather not wait." With a sickening click, each component snapped into place as the others started to fall into place. My mother took over, speaking in a quiet but firm tone as if she were guiding me through something I would find difficult. "In light of our financial circumstances and the fact that both of our daughters are organizing weddings," my father stated cautiously, "that's why we wanted to talk about timing and resources." Brooke cut in. "What Mom is trying to say is that setting priorities makes sense. We thought you would think about delaying, since you and Nathan already have established jobs and Adrian and I want to get married as soon as possible. Delaying our nuptials. The one that was fully prearranged. The one I purchased." I looked around the room, hoping that someone would smile and acknowledge that this was some kind of terrible, complex joke. However, my dad refused to look at me. "As a family, we've talked about it," he continued softly, "and we believe Brooke and Adrian should accept your date and location." Everything is set up well, so we can still contribute to one wedding's appropriate funding. As a family, you have talked about it, I said softly again. However, Nathan and I were left out of this family conversation regarding our wedding. My mother added, "We knew you'd be upset at first," as she reached for my hand. I withdrew. "But Lauren, you've always been the sensible one." The sensible one. I concluded for her, the one who gives up what she wants. Brooke's face became tense. I find this to be significant. Given his immigration predicament, Adrian and I must get married as soon as possible. I had never heard of any visa problems before. The justification seemed flimsy, like a practiced falsehood for pity. She went on, "We don't have time to organize a completely new wedding. And yours is flawless already. It's so good that you want to steal it." My voice broke, and the words fell in the middle of the room like shattered glass. My father, attempting to maintain his composure, added, "Not steal. Distribute. The venue and I have previously discussed moving the reservation." The words made my veins freeze. "You've reached out to my venue already," I muttered, "without first speaking to me." Brooke sighed and remarked, "We knew you'd be difficult about it," as if my legitimate fury were some sort of juvenile outburst. For this reason, we handled the logistics first. Desperate for someone, anyone, to support me in this chaos, I turned to Nathan. "How do you feel about all of this?" With a quivering voice, I asked him. He seems unsurprised, or furious. Simply put, composed, measured. "It's surprising," he said cautiously. "However, family issues are complex. Maybe we ought to think about what is being suggested." Suggested. It felt like treason to say those terms out loud. Cold and calculating. My hands trembled as I gently stood up. "This is unbelievable," I murmured, gasping for air. "In reality, you're attempting to ruin my wedding day. My location. All of the plans I have for months." Brooke gave a dramatic eye roll. "Later you can cry. This day is now mine." Her nonchalant brutality hit me like a punch to the body. I searched for even the smallest glimmer of shame, a hint of rethinking, as I glanced at every family member in the room. However, there was none. Just icy resolve, and the silent hope that I would comply, as usual. "This is something you've always done," I muttered, struggling to keep my voice calm. "They always took what was rightfully mine and assumed I would accept it. With generosity. However, this is not the same. I'm getting married today. My future with Nathan. My mother insisted that a wedding may take place at any time. This is urgently needed by your sister. And it doesn't matter what I need. What about all of the things Nathan and I have organized and funded?" My dad's eyes lowered as he shuffled in his chair. "Your deposits will be returned, eventually, as soon as our financial circumstances improve." I tasted the word and repeated, "eventually." Like so many of their unfulfilled promises, it sounded hollow. At that moment, Nathan stepped up and put a supporting hand on my back. "I believe Lauren and I need some alone time to talk about this. You're making an important request." I stepped out of his reach and yelled, "There's nothing to discuss. They've made up their minds already. Behind our backs, they have already begun to transfer arrangements. Let's avoid making snap decisions," Nathan stated in an overly composed and polished tone. "Emotions are running high right now for everyone." I gazed at him, this man I was meant to marry, looking for anger, for agreement, for anything approaching collaboration. However, he was aloof, disconnected, written, and for some reason that frightened me more than Brooke's arrogant conceit or my parents' treachery. I murmured softly, clutching my coat with shaking hands, "I have to go. I am unable to be here at this time." Brooke called after me in a mocking tone, "Lauren, don't be dramatic. Whether you agree with it or not, this is taking place. We already have the deposit in our names." At the door, I paused and gave them all one final look. "Are you aware of the irony?" I said. "My whole life, I've accepted less, so Brooke may have more." I've moved aside. I have not spoken. The sensible one has been me. I glanced at my mom first, then at Brooke. However, this time, I refuse to bend. "You've gone too far this time." The winter air was cold against my skin as I strolled by myself to my car. Nathan didn't follow. He stayed behind, as he would later remark, to make things more amicable. However, that night, something broke. Something long-lasting. Not only in me, but also in the flimsy structure of our so-called family. I was unaware at the time, none of us were, that this split would be the first, and what it would reveal would permanently alter each and every one of our lives. Every hour seemed to exacerbate the hurt, and the week after that terrible family meal turned into a fog of treachery. My mother's texts were continuously buzzing on my phone. Each one is more cunning than the others. Using your color scheme, Brooke has already placed her invitation order. Don't make this any harder than it has to be, please. You were brought up to be unselfish by your father and myself. Why are you doing this to your sister? Everyone agrees that this is the most financially sensible course of action. Why are you unable to view that? I stopped replying on the third day. Their gaslighting was becoming intolerable to me. Nathan's actions throughout this period were equally perplexing. Instead of encouraging me, he insisted that I take the high road. As I grieved on our couch, he said, "Perhaps we find another venue. Later in the year, perhaps. Later on in the year." As if there had been a small scheduling error. "Your relationships with your family are important," he remarked softly. "In order to preserve those ties, sometimes compromise is required." "Agree to compromise," I yelled. Our wedding was stolen by them. Additionally, the location has already acknowledged that they moved our payment to Brooke's name without my consent. For a brief while, Nathan's face wavered before settling into the same worried expression. "You two must have been on the original contract," he remarked. Unfortunately, however, there might not be many legal options. He gave a chilly reaction. Clinical. I was still in shock from the emotional gut punch, but I had detached myself. He dissuaded me from challenging the venue transfer or seeking legal advice. He said, "It will only lead to more conflict. Let's not get out of hand." The email then arrived. On what was supposed to be my wedding day, our photographer sent me a congratulations message, thanking me for updating the bride's name and expressing excitement about working with Brooke and Adrian. The messages were similar. From the florist, the caterer, the group, they had all been contacted. They had all been informed that I was no longer the bride. Every aspect of my meticulously organized party has been methodically overrun by them. Individually, from one dealer to another, one memory at a time. There was a fleeting period of lucidity when confiding in Jessica. She raged, "This goes beyond sibling rivalry. It's pathological. Additionally, your parents are encouraging it." I acknowledged they've always favored her. However, this seems planned, as if they had coordinated the ambush. What about Nathan's response? Jessica asked thoughtfully. "It's peculiar. On your behalf, the majority of partners would be furious." I started to defend him, but before I could finish, a fresh notification buzzed on my phone. Brooke. On Instagram, she had shared, "I'm thrilled to share our wonderful day at Lakeside Gardens on June 15th, because sometimes dreams come true in the most unexpected ways." Dream venue, bride-to-be, bliss. She was pictured in a bridal boutique with dresses that matched the ones I had bookmarked. The identical specialty cocktails were featured in the caption. The same tune from the first dance. The same flowers. The same idea. My wedding. My idea. My life. Repackaged as belonging to her. It was amazing how precisely she had planned her theft. Mutual pals left a ton of confused comments on Brooke's Instagram photo. A number of people asked me directly if we were planning a double wedding. Others who were more conscious of our tense past sent private messages that were full of doubt and worry. The treachery was even more embarrassing because Brooke's statement was made public. It was performed, not only stolen. I found out later that night that Nathan had erased a number of password-protected files from our shared cloud storage. They included financial records related to our wedding preparations, such as invoices, agreements, and payment plans. He claimed it was to reduce stress and move forward positively when I confronted him. The language seemed sterilized, empty, like a news release rather than a response. My suspicions about his real intentions grew. 2 days later, I passed the wedding salon where I had placed my dress order, while I looked among scented candles and teas in a desperate attempt to find peace. And stop. Brooke, wearing a dress that was almost just like mine, was standing on the pedestal. I'm holding a flute of champagne. Beside her, our mother was beaming with delight. Attendants flitted about as if she were a member of the royal family. With my pulse pounding, I entered. "Why are you in this place?" I cut through the fake happiness and demanded. Brooke didn't even bat an eyelid. "Obviously, I'm finishing up my wedding dress. I decided on something comparable since you weren't answering Mom's texts on repaying your deposit. Common. That and my dress are almost the same. Are you genuinely attempting to emulate me?" Our mother moved between us, grinning broadly. "Please, Lauren, you're creating a commotion. Brooke made this design choice on her own. It's not her fault that your tastes are similar." "A similar flavor?" I laughed resentfully. "She has researched and replicated every aspect of my wedding. This is not an accident. It's an obsession." Under the shimmering veil, Brooke's voice was icy as she took a step forward. She stated bluntly, "You always think everything is about you. Have you considered the possibility that I might be more deserving of this?" "What do you deserve, Brooke?" I inquired. "How could you possibly defend robbing my wedding?" She squinted. With terrifying certainty, she declared, "I've always been their favorite. I'm just asserting what ought to come to me first out of the blue. It was your moment to shine. It's my time now." She adjusted her veil and looked at the mirror. "Perhaps your darling Nathan is more aware of that than you are." I felt sick to my stomach. "What does that mean to you?" I asked harshly. Brooke gave a slow, poisoned smile. "Nothing. Simply put, occasionally people realize where a family's true worth rests." I got home early from dinner with Jessica that evening. It was dark in the flat. Empty. Nathan had texted earlier, "Don't wait up, I'm working late." On the kitchen counter, however, his laptop remained unaltered. He had his keys hanging. Then his phone, which had been left on the table, buzzed. The lock screen displayed a message from an unsaved number. "Confirmed meeting. MP is carrying papers. 10 p.m. Hotel Riverdale. Adrian Voss." My heart thumped. It was impossible to overlook the synchronicity. I reached for my phone, keys, and coat. I went to the Riverdale Hotel, a classy, discreet business hotel on the outskirts of the city, driven by adrenaline and treachery. Nerves fraying with each heartbeat, I parked across the street. I saw them inside the darkened bar. Adrian and Nathan, occupying a near seat. Between them, heads hunched over papers. Nathan wasn't working over his working hours, and it wasn't a coincidence. Instead of happenstance, their body language implied conspiracy. There was only smooth communication, no hesitation, no unfamiliarity. The papers were approved. Inconspicuously, a USB drive moved from Nathan's hand to Adrian's. No stress, no awkwardness. They moved as if they had worked together for years. Not a tragic turn of romantic fate that brought future in-laws together. The following morning was the last straw. On my porch, like a ticking time bomb, was an ivory envelope that had been hand-delivered by courier. There was a tastefully printed invitation inside. Adrian Voss and Brooke Hale. Ask for the privilege of being present during their nuptials. June 15th, Lakeside Gardens. It was a flawless reproduction of my own design, which I had worked with a freelance designer to perfect for months. Complete with the characteristic calligraphy, the hand-drawn monogram, and the gold-foiled border. The sole distinction, not mine, but her initials. There was a handwritten note from Brooke inside. "I hope you can come as a normal visitor. Due to your recent emotional outbursts, we have decided not to invite you to the wedding. Perhaps get expert assistance prior to the big day." That was it. My sadness turned into something colder at that same instant. Clearer. Decide. This was no longer just a wedding. Something more profound was at play here. Something planned. Coordinated. False. The meeting in secret. The uncanny resemblance between Adrian and Nathan. The abrupt, collective betrayal of my family. And Brooke, who seemed so confident and self-satisfied that she knew she couldn't lose. It wasn't just my wedding they were seizing. My life was being destroyed by them. After gently setting the invitation on the kitchen table, I sat down with my fingers curled around the chair's edge. Stop speculating. Sufficient second-guessing. It was time to discover what Nathan, or whoever he was, had to conceal. It's time to learn about his relationship to Adrian Voss, and to discover why Brooke had become so daring as to not only ruin my day, but also make fun of me in the process. I kept thinking about the hotel meeting. Nathan had stated that I was the reason he met Adrian. However, what I observed between them suggested differently. My intuition, developed through years of experience in a competitive field, told me something wasn't right. And I suspected that the little unnoticed details would hold the secret. I was not mistaken. I discovered something hidden behind a loose panel at the rear of Nathan's office drawer while looking for tax documents. A passport, his picture, his countenance. However, what is the name? Collins, Richard. He was 4 years older than he had claimed to be, and his birth date was also different. I approached him that night. He said, "That's my official passport," with ease. My professional name is Nathan. Many executives utilize aliases for security reasons. He sounded prepared in his explanation. On paper, it seems plausible. However, his gaze flitted, avoided mine. A clue. One I was too familiar with. Later, I slipped out of bed and unlocked his phone after making sure he had fallen asleep. What was his password? Date of my birth. A sickening turn. I discovered almost nothing inside. No pictures that predate our relationship. There are hardly 10 names on the contact list. His inbox of email, not more than the previous 6 months. Nathan Cross seemed to have been fabricated, a prepackaged persona that appeared in my life on the day we first met. Over coffee with Jessica the following morning, I muttered, "I need help." She truly did stare at me. My pale cheeks and shaking hands caused her gaze to soften. "What sort of assistance?" "Expert," I said. "Is that private investigator your law firm uses still in contact with you?" Jessica's face quickly became stern and piercing. "You believe Nathan is engaged in criminal activity?" I muttered, "I don't know what to think anymore," after staring into my coffee. "However, I require facts. No more misunderstandings. Not another lie." By that afternoon, I had brought on board Samuel Reeves, a former FBI agent who is now a private investigator with a reputation for working in white-collar crime and financial fraud. My personal savings were mostly depleted by his retainer. However, I had a gut feeling that this would be the most significant purchase I ever made. I handed him Adrian's full name, the passport information, and Nathan's, Richard's, alleged history. "Start with these," I said. "I want to know if they were acquainted prior to Brooke allegedly meeting him." I conducted my own research while I awaited Reeves's findings. With its good credentials and positive reviews, Nathan's business website appeared authentic. However, the more I looked, the more hazy the situation became. The references from the client, not verifiable. The company's address, a mailbox in a shared office unit that is rented. His LinkedIn profile was polished, yet it was riddled with job openings that were justified as independent consulting. Moreover, the Harvard MBA he proudly mentioned, his name and graduation date did not appear in any alumni records. My reality began to crumble. Not only was the man I was going to marry a liar, but he was also a ghost. Reeves called 3 days later. He spoke in a direct manner. No idle chatter. He said, "Your fiancé is not who he says he is." My heart stopped beating. Nathan Cross is a persona that was developed about 3 years ago. Richard Cowan, a former CFO of Meridian Investments, is his true name. During an SEC probe into dishonest accounting practices, he abruptly quit. I felt sick to my stomach. Deceptive tactics. Reeves added, a number of investors lost millions, but he was never formally charged. A private settlement was reached. Cowan consented to permanently quit the banking industry as part of the settlement. I answered numbly, but he's running a consulting firm now. Exact, using meticulously faked credentials and a new name. It's clever identity laundering that is barely illegal enough to get away with it. And Adrian Voss. I inquired, any link? Reeves answered, that's where it gets interesting. In reality, Adrian Voss is Martin Petrovich, a former Meridian Investments legal counsel. He contributed to the agreements that prevented Cowan from going to jail. They have been collaborating for many years. The words struck the chest like a blow. Since the day we first met, Nathan, Richard, had been deceiving me. The whole thing between us was a screenplay. A show. A cover. However, what was it that he wanted from me? From my relatives. There is more, Reeves stated somberly. In the past 2 years, they have together established a number of sham corporations, registered in Malta, Delaware, and the Cayman Islands. The trend implies that they are getting ready for a big financial decision, perhaps another investment plan. I questioned, do you think my family is the target? We're not rich. Maybe not directly, Reeves said, but isn't your father a member of the Westlake Credit Union Board? Yes, he has access to internal loan approvals, forthcoming real estate projects, and sensitive financial data, leverage, because of that position. As I gazed at the wall, the realization dawned on me. This was hardly a romantic tale. It was a scam. I was the target of a protracted, deliberate scam. Having first-hand knowledge of regional development initiatives, high-value client portfolios, and considerable influence over financing decisions were all benefits of that role. The parts started coming together to form an image I didn't want to see. I hadn't won Nathan over. I had been his aim, attacked my family. My father was the target. Adrian and Brooke's unexpected romance. This was no accident. The play included it. Their bond gave our family structure more validity, or camouflage. Access is allowed. Assumed was trust. My parents' deception and the theft of the wedding venue hadn't been motivated by Brooke's self-centeredness after all. It had been planned. Every action was calculated. Every action is intentional. I asked for an urgent meeting with Reeves the next morning. His face was stern when he arrived, carrying a heavy folder of documents. Records found therein linked both Richard Cowan, Nathan, and Martin Petrovich, Adrian, to previous financial irregularities, including whistleblower statements concealed in court settlements, offshore accounts, and phantom LLCs. The most damning finding, though, email correspondence. Dozens of them. Months before I even met Nathan, they had been preparing their strategy for approaching my family. What is their ultimate goal? My question was hardly audible above a whisper. Reeves turned the last page. They seemed to be getting ready to present a high-yield investment opportunity based on recent transactions and the chronology of their company formations. Probably going after your father's Westlake Credit Union network. He hesitated. These won't be worthwhile investments considering their past. These will be advanced Ponzi schemes with the goal of obtaining as much money as possible before collapsing. My stomach turned to lead as I gazed at the printed facts. How can I prevent them? With caution, Reeves stated, that depends. Are you prepared to face your fiancé right now? Or would you like to obtain more proof, sufficient to enlist the authorities and guarantee their accountability? I took a while to respond. The decision's weight weighed heavily on my chest. I made the most difficult choice of my life that evening. I wouldn't go up to Nathan just yet. I would comply. I'd pretend to forgive Brooke, make supper, smile, and continue organizing the absurdity of a second wedding, all the while recording it all. Each transfer, all name, all lie. I greeted Nathan as if nothing had changed when he got home. As if I was unaware of his true name. As if I hadn't seen the documents demonstrating his financial predatory nature. My cheek ached from his acidic kiss. His inquiries regarding my day felt like silk-encased traps. However, I did my part. As I stirred my fork through the uncooked pasta over supper, I remarked, I've been thinking about the wedding situation. Perhaps you are correct. It might be best to arrange a new date. Perhaps maintaining family unity is worth the cost. His face lit up with relief. Short, not protected. He remarked, "That's very mature of you. I've always respected your sense of reason." I gave a soft smile. "This weekend, could you assist me explain it to my parents? Perhaps we could have dinner with Adrian and Brooke. Make amends. Proceed." "Yes," he responded, speaking too hastily. "I'm confident that we can all make progress." I painstakingly collected evidence over the course of the following week, taking each breath under the guise of acceptance and wrapping each action in calm resolve. I set up a recording program on our home PC, recorded shady phone conversations. I took pictures of every document Nathan foolishly left out in the open. Every new finding broke another part of my heart. However, it also made the truth clear. When I unintentionally opened an email intended for him, it contained a comprehensive proposal detailing intentions to contact my father's banking clients with investment opportunities linked to non-existent development projects. This was the last piece of confirmation. The estimated scam was more than $20 million. Nathan and Adrian intended to disappear after the money cleared. The money was transferred to offshore accounts, and the evidence was meticulously removed. I waited until he got home and poured himself a drink that evening, after compiling the proof. I then printed copies of every damaging email, spreadsheet, and falsified agreement, and lay them out between us on the coffee table. With a steady voice, I said, "Richard Cowan." The ice in his tumbler clinked softly as he froze. His face changed from bewilderment to something more piercing. "Computation. Or, when it comes to operating investment scams, do you prefer Nathan Cross?" To his honor or disgrace, he bounced back fast. Like an automatic defensive mechanism, that charm that I had previously found disarming flashed back to life. "Lauren," he replied with ease, "there's an explanation for everything you believe you've discovered. Yes, following some regrettable business issues, I changed my name, but that doesn't alter who I am, or my feelings for you." I cocked my head. "And exactly how do you feel about me? The daughter of a financial executive whose connections you have been attempting to take advantage of since our first encounter." He tensed up. He firmly stated, "Our relationship is separate from business. I really do care about you." As if Adrian truly loves Brooke. I fired back. "That's why you planned this whole thing, isn't it? Double access to my father's network, two couples." Then his mask came off. Only for a second. And the truth took its place. Chilly, flat, unrepentant. He remarked, "Your sister was always the easier target. So in need of attention. I'm quite excited to compete with you. She nearly begged to replace you after only one discussion about your wedding plans." My stomach turned over. "You took advantage of her jealousy," I muttered. "She must surpass me." He answered, "We just recognized the dynamics already in motion and made good use of them." I shuddered at his clinical detachment. He continued by saying, "And your parents were surprisingly easy to sway. They changed their support more quickly than I had anticipated once Adrian brought up his family's investing potential." "Did you ever intend to marry me?" I inquired. It was the last question that mattered, not in a legal sense, on an emotional level. He paused, just enough time to express everything without using words. He acknowledged that marriage would have offered certain legal protections for our financial agreements. Then, more tender, almost loving. "But I did like spending time with you, Lauren. You were more than simply a tool." Something inside me was solidified by his response's intentional harshness. My determination. "Leave," I muttered. "Assemble your belongings and depart before I call the police with this proof." "You won't do that," he stated coolly and assuredly. "Your family will be humiliated if you expose me. Your parents would become less respected in the neighborhood. Your sister would be devastated. Even at your own sacrifice, you have dedicated your life to keeping children safe. You won't give up now." Something I had never experienced before was triggered by his confidence, his haughty presumption that I would once more bend, surrender, and protect. Clarity. I realized for the first time that I was the ideal target because of the dynamics in my family. How I had been prepared for someone like him, a predator seeking a woman who had been taught to put others before herself, by years of being forced to come second. "You're mistaken," I stated in a firm voice. "The truth is more important this time than anyone's comfort. Include my—" He took a moment to examine me. "This won't end well for anyone," he muttered as he started to gather his necessities in silence. But my attention was no longer on him. A more profound question swam across my head. How can I shield my family from an impending $20 million scam without losing them to denial? Because breaking the truth about Nathan, Richard, would also reveal Brooke's relationship to be a fake, revealing my parents' partiality for what it was, a problem. I was unable to simply yell it from the roofs. I required evidence. I also required a plan. I worked in silence for the next 48 hours. I put together a thorough dossier that included emails, bank information, governmental records, and screenshots of discussions. Everything that links Martin Petrovich and Richard Cowan to their false past and true identities. And above all, their plot against my father's business associates. I was the first to move. When it was ready, I requested an urgent meeting with my folks over the phone. My mother quickly yelled, "Lauren, we know you're upset about the wedding. However, are you attempting to ruin your sister's relationship? That is beneath you." She added, "Adrian comes from a great family. Your father has already talked to him about investment opportunities." I answered, "That's precisely what worries me. I have evidence that indicates these opportunities are fraudulent." "On what basis?" She sneered. "Your own inquiry. Because you're envious." My father then picked up the phone. "Enough, Lauren. Your actions are starting to worry me. Even if you've always been dramatic, this is new. Perhaps you ought to discuss these conspiracy beliefs with a professional." Click. Although I was hurt, I wasn't shocked by the dismissal. Adrian had carefully played with them, and the ideal groundwork had been established by their long-standing prejudice toward Brooke. I needed a fresh perspective. I then looked at Brooke. I framed my invitation to coffee as an effort to make amends. A new beginning. With her trademark smug look and her expensive sunglasses, she came with assurance. She sat down and remarked, "I'm glad you finally accepted the situation." "You'll change your mind," Adrian remarked. "I wanted to share something with you, actually," I said, passing a shortened copy of the dossier across the table. She gave the file a fleeting glance. She grinned and said, "Let me guess. They are criminals in disguise who are attempting to ruin our family." "How handy for your story," I remarked in a strained voice. "Brooke, just take a look at the proof. Their true names. Their financial fraud history. The pattern, they have already done this. Families with banking connections are their focus. It is not an accident." The file was pushed back across the table by Brooke. "It's pitiful, even for you. Making fictitious paperwork, because you can't accept the fact that I'm getting married to a successful man, and yours was, what did he say? A recognition of family priorities." With venom, she said, "Adrian told me you might try something like this." I answered slowly, "He warned you because he knew I might find out." "Consider it, Brooke. How did you get to know him?" "Immediately following my engagement. You were at a coffee shop you had never been to before. Since your interests were mine, he was aware of them all. Nathan fed it to him. We share interests and have a natural chemistry," Brooke said sharply as she stood up. "Lauren, it's not all about you. Perhaps some men simply don't like your lame, people-pleasing routine and would rather see ladies with personality." With her shoes clicking like a closing gavel against the tile, she left without saying another word. I sat there for a while, allowing the resentment to consume me. I didn't cry, though. Not now. At last, I realized that direct approaches would not be effective. Not with my folks. They were too firmly established. The fantasy was too good to be true. Too totally coerced to listen to me tell the truth, especially in secret and in silence. Unquestionable truth was what I needed. Public truth. A moment that was so obvious and unavoidable that even they were unable to justify it. As I went over Reeves's most recent report, the answer became clear. Several of my father's banking colleagues were expected to attend Brooke's rehearsal dinner, a high-profile gathering where Nathan and Adrian intended to promote their fake investment proposition. The staging was ideal. That evening, they would make verbal promises and then disappear with millions of dollars following the wedding. My moment would come then. I would be the one in the trap. In close collaboration with Reeves, I created a polished presentation of their whole plan that was fact-based and devoid of emotive framing. Their true selves, their financial offenses, the shell corporations, the history of using romantic infiltration to target families, the phony development initiatives. Additionally, I got in touch with FBI Financial Crimes Division agent Maya Grant. She looked over the files and got back to me right away. She stated that although this is convincing, it is insufficient to make an arrest. Not quite yet. We require documented proof of solicitation, which is a clear request for money made under false pretenses. I informed her that they intended to present the proposal at my sister's rehearsal dinner the following Friday. I'll be present. I am capable of donning a recording device. That would strengthen our argument, she concurred. But be aware that addressing them in public is dangerous. The foundation of these men's professions has been manipulation. They won't die in peace. I gave a nod. I said, I don't expect quiet. I anticipate clarity. I prepared thoroughly in the days before the rehearsal dinner, practicing my remarks, honing my supporting details, and preparing for the big moment. In addition, I accepted the possibility that my relationship with my family would never be restored, something more difficult than betrayal. I would be revealing the truth about my parents, their readiness to forgo my happiness, by exposing Nathan and Adrian. And my sister Brooke, whose treachery had always been planned rather than spontaneous. Lakeside Gardens served as the venue for the rehearsal supper. My location. It was like swallowing glass as I walked in and saw the lighting, the flowers, and the precise decor I had originally imagined. However, I suppressed the agony. This was no longer about loss. Truth was at issue. Agent Harrington gave me a recording device, which I wore, deftly concealed in an old brooch. Even up close, she had promised me it was undetected. My parents gave me a formal greeting. My mom had a tight smile. We didn't think you would show up. I calmly stated, given the circumstances, I wouldn't miss my sister's rehearsal dinner. Brooke avoided me and gave me suspicious looks. She had forewarned the room about Lauren's instability. Meanwhile, Adrian and Nathan maneuvered the crowd effortlessly. They were quite charming, especially when it came to my father's banking co-workers, shaking hands, laughing together, and handing out beautifully printed investment folders bearing the name Patterson Collins Development. Fiction. Everything. I waited until the meal was over, the wine glasses were full, and the focus was at ease. Then Adrian got up and gave his glass a soft clinking. Thank you all for coming, he said in a silky voice. Yes, family is a big part of this evening, but so is opportunity. I want to share something with you for a moment. I moved silently to the projector, where the technical personnel had previously been instructed and had prepared the connection. I projected my voice over the room and said, I have something important to share before my future brother-in-law continues. Something that impacts everyone present, particularly those thinking about making investments. My father, already halfway up from his chair, admonished, Lauren, this is not appropriate. I apologize, Dad, I responded steadily, but it's essential. I pressed the remote control. The screen flickered to the first slide. This room knows Richard Cowan and Martin Petrovich as Adrian Voss and Nathan Cross. Both men have a history of financial fraud, I added. Additionally, both are now using fictitious identities. The room echoed with confusion. Then murmurs. Then sound the alarm. SEC inquiry files, headlines regarding Meridian Investments' demise, and pictures of both men with their true names and prior positions were displayed on the following slides. Adrian shouted, his voice higher than he meant to, this is ridiculous. This is jealousy, some sort of personal grudge. Nathan approached me with a low, menacing voice. Cease this. Right now. You're making a grave error. I turned to him and spoke louder, loud enough for everyone in the room to hear. No. I made the error of assuming that I would keep quiet to maintain harmony within the family. So in order to keep things looking nice, I would safeguard your swindle. The presentation went on to display time-stamped, authenticated emails that talked about their tailored approach to my family. I clicked forward and remarked, "You'll see their strategy here. To gain access to my father's financial network, use Brooke. Make use of the trust in our family. Safe commitments." The slide that showed one of the men's emails was greeted by gasps. It described my father as a legacy banker with deep connections and old-school trust instincts, while Brooke was described as emotionally pliable and eager to compete with her sister. The room's atmosphere changed. Bankers started looking suspiciously through the investment packets. A few of them took out their phones. One leaned over and whispered urgently to my father, "Adrian, please tell me this isn't true." Brooke muttered, her voice shaking, as she lost the attitude she had once so effortlessly displayed. However, the double doors opened before he could respond. Agent Harrington came in with two other FBI officers at his sides. The room reverberated with the sound of their presence. She firmly declared, "Martin Petrovich and Richard Cowan, we would like to talk to you about the claims of securities violations and wire fraud." Chaos. Nathan quickly headed for a side exit, but agents caught him with lightning-fast accuracy. As the weight of exposure set in, Adrian's voice trembled with stress as he started into a panicked, rambling speech about misunderstandings and legitimate business restructuring. Clearly shaken, my father's banking colleagues took a step back. A few came up to me quietly and expressed their appreciation. One murmured, "Thank you for stopping this." Another person said, "You saved a lot of people." I was confronted by Brooke in the middle of everything. Her cheeks were smeared with tears. Her raw, red-rimmed eyes looked into mine with remorse rather than rage. "You knew," she murmured quietly. "You attempted to inform me." "I did," I said, not in an impolite manner. "They went after us both. They made use of everyone and everything, including our family." She gave a slow shake of her head before settling onto a chair close by. The diamond on her engagement ring caught the chandelier light as if to taunt her, and she covered her face with her palm. How could my perception of him have been so incorrect? Almost everything. I couldn't provide her with a response that would lessen the impact. She would have to experience it just like I did. My parents stood motionless across the room. The evening they had dedicated themselves to, the ideal wedding they had given precedence to over mine, was exposed as a complex scam. In front of their friends, coworkers, and community, their judgment and blind bias were exposed. They didn't appear angry, not combative, simply put broken. Nathan hesitated for 1 second as he was escorted past me in handcuffs. He said to himself, "You could have just walked away. You avoided the collateral damage." I looked him in the eyes. I calmly and confidently remarked, "Unlike you, I don't abandon people, even when they've hurt me." Amid rumors of disapproval and public scandal, the wedding was called off. Brooke hid from reporters and interested acquaintances by going to a friend's cabin by the lake. My parents were forced to deal with uncomfortable inquiries and the fallout from their misguided confidence. And me, among the ashes of a falsehood that had all but rewritten my existence, I stood alone. Silence hung between me and my family in the weeks that followed, like an old wound, raw, waiting to see if it would heal or scar over. The FBI's inquiry was broadened. Other victims came forward. More people are exposed as being pawns in the multi-state scam run by Nathan and Adrian. Both guys eventually agreed to plea bargains. 5 years in federal prison for Nathan Cowan. 3 years, Adrian Petrovich. Both were hit with fines they would never be able to pay back. On paper, at least, justice was done. But there was no victory within, no satisfactory conclusion, just a sense of hollow tiredness. Our shared apartment seemed poisoned. Things that had once represented affection now felt alien, manipulative instruments. Was any of it authentic? Was I a blueprint that he studied, or had he ever loved me? I accepted a high-pressure campaign that required all of my resources and immersed myself into my work. It was a diversion. It was a matter of survival. I pondered whether healing would ever feel like wholeness, or simply having peace with the fragments, as I sat by myself in silence on certain nights. Coworkers observed the change in me, the reserved demeanor, the silent poise that had taken the place of my earlier candor. I wasn't exactly brittle. Just be careful. As if adjusting to life within a recently reaffirmed border, Jessica gently expressed concern that I was concealing rather than curing. However, she acknowledged that I needed the type of work-related diversion that kept my hands occupied while my heart silently rebalanced. 3 months after the breakdown, she reminded me over lunch that I was processing trauma. Not only betrayal of a relationship, betrayal of the family too. That takes time to heal. I confessed. I wonder if I did the right thing. Publicly disclosing everything didn't only ruin Nathan and Adrian. Everyone was harmed. My folks, Brooke, our entire community. You prevented fraud, Jessica remarked. You defended your father's coworkers and investors. That came at a cost, but perhaps it was worthwhile. After a pause, she said, and perhaps those familial ties you're lamenting, they were founded on habits that first left you open to being harmed by someone like Nathan. Perhaps that tipping moment was required. Her words gave the pain shape, but they didn't take anything from it. Goal. Unexpectedly, a job offer from reputable Boston agency Meridian Creative marked the start of true healing. To accept it, I had to leave the places where my trauma was physically present. The lakeside promenade where Nathan initially declared his love for me, the apartment, and the eateries. There were no remnants of those memories in Boston. It was a gift of unfamiliarity. Situated over the Charles River, my apartment turned into a haven, furnished according to my personal preferences and comfort level, rather than compromising. I was able to breathe in a space that was unaffected by performance or comparison for the first time in years. I got a letter 6 months into my new existence. Written by hand, no address for return. From Brooke. It started, I don't expect forgiveness. However, I must apologize to you, not only for the nuptials, for all my life, I took without ever thinking about what I was taking. She discussed therapy in her writing. It was her response to enduring emotions of inadequacy, not my invention, that led her to finally face the patterns that built our relationship. You were always the one with the ability, the self-sufficient one. I didn't realize how much effort it required to make what you had, but I wanted it. Her remarks were laced with agonizing self-knowledge. I'm not looking for a relationship. I simply wanted you to know that I now understand the reality. No matter how late that revelation was, I took a while to reply. I needed time to process what she had said. However, her letter turned an intangible and abstract concept into a tangible recognition. It became into something I could study. And after a while, release. My father contacted 3 months later. His introduction was odd, and his voice was uncertain. He remarked, "Your mother and I have been reflecting. We've come to the realization that our prioritization of some things wasn't always equitable to you." It wasn't about fairness, Dad, I said, feeling surprisingly at ease. It has to do with visibility. Not only as the quiet, trustworthy daughter, or as Brooke's sister, just spotted. For my identity, the closest thing I had ever heard to comprehension was his silence. When he eventually said, "We'd like to visit. If that's okay with you." Have no expectation, just starting a discussion. They were cautious in their visit, restrained but important. The wedding was not discussed. Not right away. However, we practiced a new language, curiosity rather than comparison, listening without defense, instead of previous scripts. I had never seen photo albums till my mother brought them. She shared tales about myself, as well as about us. She posed inquiries, actual ones, regarding my recollection, about my feelings. As they got ready to depart, she humbly acknowledged, "We made mistakes." We didn't even identify the patterns until everything went apart. I apologized that seeing them caused such suffering. I informed her, I'm still working through it. I'm not prepared for family vacations or to act as though nothing is wrong. However, I'm willing to create something fresh, something more wholesome. If you are, Boston also provided other surprises. Among them was photographer Daniel Westfield, with whom I collaborated on a significant campaign. Slowly his fascination grew, with respect, without the passion or euphoria that used to cause me to confuse love with adrenaline. He wasn't attempting to impress me. He was attempting to get to know me. I also have the strength and the room to let someone in with their eyes open for the first time. On our third date, I told him I have trust issues. Recent encounter with complex deceit. Daniel said trust is earned, not assumed. I have patience. He was too. Daniel didn't attempt to prove anything with ostentatious gestures or spectacular announcements over the course of months of calm constancy. Through his presence and his actions, he demonstrated integrity to me. His response was not one of sympathy when I eventually told him my entire story. It wasn't a shock. It was silent awe. He remarked, "You shielded those who hadn't shielded you. It speaks volumes about your character." After meeting my parents during their second visit and handling that complexity with poise and deferential bounds, Daniel proposed a year into our relationship. Nathan's gaudy diamond was nothing like the ring. The sapphire was rich, deep, and flawed. It reminded him of my fortitude, he remarked. There is no pressure, no timetable, he informed me. We worked together to build this at our own speed. We got married in a modest ceremony at a historic Boston library 18 months later. We wrote our own vows together by candlelight and tea late one evening. It was genuine, personal, and completely performance-free. Although they weren't in the center, my parents were there. Brooke didn't go. However, in our honor, she sent a handwritten note of congratulations, along with a payment to an advocacy group for scam victims, a gesture that respected the limits of our present while acknowledging our past. 3 years after the dinner that completely destroyed my life, I'm in a situation I never thought I'd be in. Calm. My relationship with my family is still evolving. It is now characterized by open communication rather than tacit duty. Brooke and I occasionally correspond via email. It's recognition, not reconciliation. Two grown-ups no longer play out their youthful parts. The most significant lesson was learned gradually rather than all at once. If we are willing to listen, intuition is the truth. Nathan was lying, and I knew it. The partiality of my family, the slow deterioration of emotions under the surface. However, I had been conditioned to distrust myself whenever my truth didn't align with what other people expected of me. The foundation of my recovery was discovering how to trust my gut once more. I don't feel resentment now when I consider the life I've created from the ashes of betrayal. Just thankfulness. I'm thankful for the boundaries, the clarity, and the genuine connection that now serve as the cornerstone of my experience. I was freed from habits I had regarded as usual for far too long by the anguish I previously believed would break me. I've discovered that running away from people who have harmed us does not lead to true freedom. It results from overcoming the convictions that initially left us vulnerable to their harm. My wedding was stolen by my sister. She did it with my parents' assistance. However, by doing this, they freed me from the silent contract that I never accepted. To protect the peace at my own expense. Her joy was ruined by the truth about my fiancé. However, it also dispelled the myth that I needed to remain little in order to get love. Have you ever experienced a significant betrayal and had to regain trust? How you handled that journey would be fascinating to hear. Comment in the space provided below. Pose a query, or simply tell someone that they are not alone. Please think about subscribing if this story spoke to you, or forwarding it to someone who might find courage in the knowledge that recovery is achievable. I am grateful that you accompanied me on my journey from treachery to truth, from surviving to finding serenity, from quiet to speaking. I hope your journey brings you the sincere connection that we all deserve. no matter what it looks like. And ultimately, leaving with my peace intact was the best form of retaliation, not being exposed. The version of my existence that I believed I needed was destroyed by betrayal. However, I gained strength, independence, and clarity as a result of healing. Establish boundaries if you are harboring hurt. Recuperate, develop, let go gracefully. Success and silence can sometimes speak louder than any amount of conflict. Have you ever had to rebuild after being betrayed? Please share your story in the comments section. Instead of just hurt, let's create a space for healing. You don't have to remain broken. You're not alone.